Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Stop the Foreclosure. Today, we are going to talk about the fundamentals of foreclosure, kind of the foreclosure process, what's involved, where you can get some information for, each different state, kind of talk about some of the different varieties of foreclosure. So just once again, I'm going to kind of say this to get this out of the way. We're not attorneys. We're not real estate agents. We're not CPAs. We're not mental health professionals. We're just here to offer some information to educate you so that you can make the best decision for you and your family, and that we just love you and that we just want the best for you. So that's just kind of let's start there at least. But foreclosure. So let's talk about a little bit about that. I want to first start off by saying that there are really only 5 ways to stop a foreclosure that I am currently aware of, and there may be more, but really, one is to get the loan current. Okay, to get caught up and get the loan current.
Yep.
Second is to pay off the mortgage, right? That could also look like taking a reverse mortgage could potentially pay off the current one and get you in a place like that's another way of stopping the foreclosure potentially. A deed in lieu of foreclosure, where basically you sign the house back over to the bank, that can also stop the foreclosure. Letting it go into foreclosure can stop the foreclosure, which is not always fun. And then quiet title. It's not something I necessarily recommend, and we'll talk about that in future episodes, but quiet title is another way that has stopped foreclosure in the past. Not always a great way. And this is permanently, right? Bankruptcy will stop the foreclosure shortly, but typically the banks pull the property out of the bankruptcy and foreclose within a few months anyway, and doesn't really stop long term and has some long term consequences. So,
Mm.
with that being said, let's just talk about the foreclosure process and where some of these might
Mm-hmm.
come into play.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
say I just got my foreclosure notice. What are some of like the first immediate steps that I can do?
okay, so you probably get like a notice of default is what some states set out. So let's talk about the first thing is the different types of foreclosures and let's talk about what state you might live in. Okay, so there's actually 3 different types of foreclosures in the United States. One is a judicial foreclosure, which means that the banks have to go through the court, and it takes usually takes longer and it's a little more complicated, and there are definitely attorneys involved from the bank. Okay. The next is a non-judicial foreclosure, which is where the states have said, you know what, banks, you don't need to go through the court system. You just go ahead and sell the house. You do what needs to be done in terms of notifying the homeowner and the public, and you just go sell the house. And in Georgia, it used to be it's still 28 days, basically from the notice of default well, really to the notice is 28 days between that and the foreclosure. So it can happen
Mm-hmm.
really quickly, and no court is involved. No. There are attorneys typically for the banks, but they don't have to go to court to foreclose. And then the third, which is the most rare, is just taking the house. Okay, and that was available in Oklahoma and a few other states as far as I know, but it's really rare and doesn't happen very often. So
Are
those are the
you
three
saying
types.
each state has different processes?
Each state, yes, they do.
Okay.
Okay. And there is a chart in the back of the book called Secrets to Keeping Your Home, Stop Foreclosure and Get On with Your Life. That has a chart in the back of the book that basically lists each state, whether they're judicial, non-judicial, how long it takes to go through foreclosure typically, if there's a redemption period. There's just different things you can learn. You can also do the research on the internet. If you type in your state, like how does my state do foreclosure? Or, how long will my state take? Like you can do all that research on the internet without having to buy the book. So it is out there. My suggestion is that you do know which it is. So normally you will get a notice of default and a time to cure the loan. Okay, they'll give you 30, 60, 90 days to like actually try and cure the loan and get
Mm.
it caught up. Okay. Banks don't really want to foreclose if they don't have to, but that is the deal. The next part, and because this is kind of like where the 28 days comes in Georgia, is that they give you a notice of sale. And that's really kind of the start of the foreclosure. Okay. Let's talk about the 2 different types of states. And it's kind of interesting is it's equally divided in the US. There's about 25 states that are judicial and 25 states that are non-judicial. and they can be right next to each other too.
Mm.
So
Robert, isn't it true that you can have both types in one state?
you can, and sometimes the homeowner gets to choose which one you want to go through. Okay, so yes, it's actually possible to have both in one state, and sometimes the banks get to choose which one they want to do, and sometimes you get to choose. So yes, all that information is really important because you kind of want to know what you're up against, or at least what the process looks like, and how much time you have, and like what are your options, right?
Are
So.
these processes something they can do in person, or is it all online, over the phone? Like, how would they get started?
Okay. So when so obviously, so then the notice of default's going to come in, and that's kind of where you kind of figure out like, okay, I need to, how do I get this caught up? There's usually going to be um, an attorney assigned to to your foreclosure. Okay. Almost in every state, they assign an attorney. All right, that's who you need to contact to begin with. Like, all right, how much do I owe? What are my legal fees? Like what's the balance right now to get caught up? And how much time do I have before you actually start selling the property? All right. Um, the two different types like we talked about, the two major types are judicial, non-judicial. So for example, Georgia is non-judicial. There's no court required. You actually sign a power of attorney saying they can sell the house at any time when you're in default in Georgia. It's brutal. You actually give away two of your constitutional rights to due process in Georgia when you sign up for a mortgage. Okay, Georgia. I know I keep harping on Georgia, but I've I've had my legal battles in Georgia. I've done all that in Georgia, so I'm really cognizant of it. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, Georgia is like the most bank-friendly state in the country. And then next door you have Florida. So you cross the state line and it's a judicial state, right? Which means that they have to go through the courts. And typically it's 6 months to 18 months has been the typical time frame for a foreclosure in Florida. And they were kind of getting really backlogged during the 2011 to 2014 time frame, and they came up with the rocket docket is what they called it, where they were trying to accelerate the mortgages as fast as possible because it was like a tidal wave coming in with foreclosures, and you don't want to be a part of the rocket docket if you can help it. Okay, so let's talk about Florida again. So across the state line is Florida, right? Like you just cross over the state line and it's completely different. It's judicial, which means the banks have to go hire an attorney and go to court to actually foreclose. And that process typically takes between 6 months to 18 months. And there was a time between 2011 and 2014 where they called the rocket docket to kind of speed up the process because of there was just a tidal wave of foreclosures happening during that period of time, unfortunately. And the good news is that they do need an attorney. It is a little bit slower process. It may actually make sense in some cases to hire a foreclosure defense attorney to slow that process down. I don't really recommend it, and I'll get into why, because that actually can cost you a lot of money in the long run. But if you need a little time to move, if you need a little time to get things set up, or kids in school or whatever, it may make sense for some of those reasons, right? To do what you need to do for your family, for you and your family. But those are kind of the two differences. One is that where the banks have to use the court system and where they don't have to use the court system, and what happens there. So you'll get a notice of sale typically, and that sale um, can happen in person or it can happen online. Okay, like once again, state lines and different county or different counties have different methods. So it's really county by county and state by state. So in Georgia, they actually call it crying out the sale. So on every
Mm.
Tuesday in the afternoon, the attorneys will get up there and they'll start speaking the sale of the house and they'll cry it out to hold the auction on the courthouse steps. It's literally in person as far as I know still. COVID may have changed things, but like back in the day, it was definitely in court. It was definitely in person. Okay. In Florida, the last time I checked, it was almost 2/3 of the counties that were online. So you'd actually go online and people would bid online and do it all there. So in person or online, you kind of have to call your local county and figure out what it's going to be and where, what's going to happen there. So, you know, and calling the attorney that is conducting your foreclosure sale is important because it gives you the information of, like, you know, how do I fill out you know, who do I need to talk to about a loan application? You know, is there any way that I can work this out with the bank? If I need more time before you start the notice of sale, like there is time between the notice of default and notice of sale to get stuff done inside that if you're in communication with the attorney. What else can I say about that? So, yeah, so some of them hold it in person, some of them hold it um,
Online.
online. The attorneys don't like you showing up at their offices, by the way. I'll just let you know that, like, they just don't care for that, you know, so, I would just do things over the phone
Through email,
take really good notes of everything you talked about, you know, who you talked about, when you talked about, what'd you talk about, what'd they promise, what they not promise.
timeline, yeah,
Yeah,
get your
everything, right?
timeline, your
It's
documents.
so
Even
important.
when you're talking with the bank.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, especially when you're talking with the bank. And you know, the moment you get the notice of default is also a good time to start the loan modification process, right? Like that's before you get the notice of sale, ideally. Um, some servicers and banks, they want you to, you know, they want you to start well before, you know, like 28 days before, or, you know, 45 days before the
Mm-hmm.
notice of sale and stuff. So
The
really, yes,
the loan modification, is that through their current bank?
yes, or
Okay.
servicer. It just depends,
That's
you know, like you got to find out who it is. Honestly, like the notice, like the first time you're 30 days late on your mortgage is when you should start your loan modification. I mean, like that's like the best time to start because you know that things you know, are not going well, and that's the best time to start. But there are deadlines along the way, whether it's the notice of default or the notice of sale, that you just want to be cognizant of when it comes to starting the loan modification. Back in the day, and you know, as kind of my reference points, is that you sometimes you couldn't even start a loan modification after the notice of sale was issued. Like some banks would just be like, nope, too late, you're done. You know, like that's all there is. So,
Yeah,
um,
I've KK and I have been out and talked to people door to door, and a lot of the times it sounds like when somebody's talking to the bank, they get moved around from one person to the next. So that's one of the reasons it's good for you to keep track and write down everybody's name, the date that you talk to them, their name, and see if you can find that same person again and work with the same person at the bank. If not, like I said, keep track of it.
Yep. It's actually one of their standard operating procedures is to move people around because they don't want to get people too attached. Like one of the homeowners that I worked with, Joy, she pardon me one second. I'm gonna actually I gotta stop this for a second. Okay, so it's actually the bank's standard operating procedures to actually move you around from people because they don't want that person to become too attached to the homeowner. Like one of the people that I worked with, Joy, she had two disabled children with disabilities, and she always kind of insisted on working with the same person, even if they would move them from building to building or department to department. Like she would track that person down inside the bank to work with them because, like, she knew she was getting favorable responses. And one of the things she always did was like learn about the person on the other side. So she
Mm,
always was like, do you have a family? Do you have, you know, like people going through foreclosure? Like she would really try and work well, it's a little harsh, but
yeah.
she would try and develop a relationship with them, right? To
Yeah.
basically get them on her side.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd also, this is a little secret, a little insider information. She would ask for the standard operating procedures of the bank. Okay, like what are your standard operating procedures? Like at what point, you know, like what does it take to stop the foreclosure or slow it down or whatever? Like she would make a friend and then ask like their standard operating procedures. And that was like her ninja secrets to getting stuff done. She
Ooh.
was she was pretty amazing, and she was fierce, right? She had 2 children that she needed to take care of that had emotional issues that she needed to protect. So a little insider information there about loan modifications. So the sale happens. So you get the notice of sale. In Florida, the bank has, like in a judicial state, I'm going to use Florida if you're judicial, it's my go-to, but in a judicial state, the bank has to show up in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, the bank does hold the note to this, and the mortgage for this property. Let's talk about this for a second. So there's a whole thing around MIRS. MIRS is the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. Okay, that's what that acronym stands for. And 95% of the loans in America get sold off, actually. When you get your loan, right? It gets sold off, and then you don't necessarily know who buys it as the homeowner because it gets registered with MIRS. And they're the ones that actually gets assigned on public record to the MIRS and some trustee or whatever. And that's where the mortgage actually goes to. Okay. And sometimes the note will go into a vault, basically. Okay. One of the things you want to do as the homeowners, you want to go make sure that they've actually pulled it out of MIRS before they're in court or before they're filing the foreclosure. All right. Like if they haven't transferred it out of MIRS into a bank or an entity that has a legal right to foreclose on you, they really shouldn't be foreclosing. Okay.
That's a good tip.
One of the things that you should go look on public record for is have they transferred, has there been an assignment out of MIRS or whomever, and match that paperwork up with your notice of default and your notice of sale to that. And then if it's not, if the assignment's not been done, then you call up the attorney and say, hey, this hasn't been assigned, stop the foreclosure, get your act together before you move forward. Okay. Or I'm going to have a wrongful foreclosure lawsuit against you in the end. Like just, throw up little words like that. Hey, you don't do it correctly, you don't follow the process, then there's a wrongful foreclosure lawsuit in your future, and they don't want that. Okay. So that can be another step to slow it down. There are other things that we'll talk about in Fight the Banks, about mirrors and allanges and all these other things, but not for today. Okay, that's future episodes. All right.
Okay.
So today, that's one of the most important steps is you go look to make sure that whoever is the entity that is foreclosing is on public record. All right. And one of the things I'll put on YouTube is like how to go do that. I will put up an episode or a chapter on like how you actually do the searches. That'll be one of the free things we offer. I'll give a couple examples of how to do that. Okay. So it goes into foreclosure. In a judicial state such as Florida and half the states, they have to go to the judge and prove that they have the legal right to foreclose, that this is the debt. It's a time for you as doing a pro se or an attorney you hire to get an accounting. Like, hey, I just want them to review the accounting and make sure it's correct, because sometimes it's not correct. So it's another way to kind of slow them down a little bit while in judicial is you ask for an accounting, Your Honor. I just want to double check to make sure everything's good, okay, and certify it. And then the judge will kind of say, okay, everything's in order. If you're not caught up at that point in time, or things haven't happened, you haven't sold the house, you haven't done what you can to stop the foreclosure, work with compassionate investors, let's say, then the house will go to sale. Okay, and like I said, in Florida, it's online. In Georgia, it is in person. Sometimes it's called a deed of trust, and the trustee will be the one selling it. They're the trustee is kind of the one put in charge of the mortgage. They're the ones that are responsible for the mortgage. It's kind of like hiring an attorney, like the attorneys do it for the banks in a lot of states. So that's the other thing is that like in Georgia, they give you the notice of sale and then they publish it in the newspaper. It has to be published in the legal newspaper for that county. So you should go double check that that's been done, because in some cases they won't publish it in the newspaper, it won't get in, and then that'll give you another 28 days or 60 days or 90 days to stave off the foreclosure. Okay.
Wow.
So you got to make sure it's in the legal publication if that's a requirement in your area, which most counties it is. But there are 3,300 counties in the United States, and they all kind of do it a little differently. And you just got to kind of figure out what's going on in your county and in your state. Okay. And then the sale's held, and sometimes it goes back to the bank. Like they can't get the money they want. There's no bidders for the property, and it'll go back to the bank, and that's known as an REO, real estate owned, kind of by the bank. Okay, it's known as your property becomes what's known as an REO. All right. In other cases, investors will buy it, and they will take over, and if you're still living there, they may start an eviction process on you. Like they actually have that right, okay? Because you are kind of trespassing on their property. And there's a third possibility of where you, not you directly, but maybe someone you know buys the property for you. Okay, that's another possibility. Or you go to the courthouse and on the steps, you say, I've got a wrongful foreclosure lawsuit in place, and whoever buys this property is going to be dealing with me in my wrongful foreclosure lawsuit. Like another possibility. I'm not suggesting you do that, but people have done that in the past. Or I have a claim on the property, like I have a lien against the property for this amount, and I'm going to make the new buyer's life very difficult, and it kind of forces the bank to take the property back. So just another way of dealing with things. And we'll talk about that in Fight the Bank episode. There's so much to talk about there. I don't recommend it at all, but it is possible. So, and then there's a redemption period where you can actually have time, like in Kansas, to go get your house back, depending on how long you've owned it, how much equity you have. There's different time frames. So, what questions? Kind of that's the main deal. What questions do you all have? Like, what comes up for you?
Are there like government agencies that might be able to assist them, like a temporary relief?
So there is state money out there which can help stop the foreclosure, but that money goes really quickly. Like Cindy, you want to talk about that? I think you've had some experience with Washington State and state funds. Can you kind of talk to some of your experiences about that?
Yes, it's my understanding because there's been so many foreclosures that the states have the funding, but a lot of states are running out of the funding because of the amount of foreclosures. And then, of course, each state has their criteria, whether it's like how long have you been out of work or what's your situation. And then they only give so much money, like it could be $10,000, it could be as high as 25. So you can, if you are looking, you can go ahead and do a search for state funding for foreclosures. And I would suggest that you go ahead and talk to one of the counselors there and find out what their criteria is and if they do in fact still have money for that type of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cyclical as far as I know. Like the state will fund it, they'll give X amount of dollars, and then it's kind of on a first come first served basis, and then they do run out until they get refunded again. So or funded again. So
Right.
there are some of those resources available. It's just you got to get there quick, and you got to have kind of be at the right time of year too sometimes. So, or I'm not like you got to go find out for yourself when they get hey, when's the next time you think you're gonna have money in and all this stuff. So, yeah, and it's obviously best to do that before you get the notice of sale. Maybe having the notice of default helps in some cases. So.
Right.
Any,
Just
yeah,
like with any agency, it takes time.
yep, yep, and certain criteria. Any other, I do want to say this about short sales. So you could end up selling the property. You get your notice of default and you're headed into the notice of sale, and you say, look, the property is not worth saving at this point, right? Like it's just, I don't know, some damage happened. We're not even living there anymore. Like the basement's leaking, like it has huge cracks, and like the walls are falling down the basement, or there's a hole in the ceiling, or there's mold everywhere, right? Like those are the possibilities where it's not even worth saving the house at this point, and you've just let it, default into foreclosure. Maybe there's a sinkhole if you're in Florida again, one of those states. So you could go into try and do a short sale. The judges will typically extend the sale date if you can show that you've got a licensed agent and that you're in sale and you've got a pending sale. And short sales can take up to 6 months to go through. It's a bit faster now. I think the banks have sped up their process, but back in the day, used to say 6 to 9 months for one to go through, and sometimes the foreclosure would happen well before the time frame was up. So just want to recommend that. Also, you can help this channel and future homeowners by, if you do sell your house, come to us, go to the website stoptheforeclosure.expert. I know it's a little on the nose. It's not .com, it's .expert. Fill out a form, say, hey, I need a realtor in my area to do a short sale. We'd love to make a recommendation for you. We vet them, we make sure they're qualified, that you're going to get a great experience and be taken care of. And that the two things you want to ask for is that there's no default deficiency judgment if you're selling below what the note is due, and find out about your tax situation. If the note is reduced and it's forgiven, then it might be a taxable event. And in the past, people have been able to avoid both those things. And if you have a good realtor to fight for you, that might help. So so that's another reason for us to help you find a good realtor, and it helps us continue this work and to help other homeowners in the future as well. So just be aware that if you're going to do a short sale, make the attorneys aware, make the judge aware, like make everyone aware that that's what you're up to, if that's the case you're going through. Also, if you work, once again, it kind of bears to be said, the sooner that you know that you're going to take some action, do it sooner than later, right? The closer you get to your sale date, the less options you have, the less whatever, and things just get tougher all the way around. So if you're going to take action, do it as soon as you know, do it as soon as you kind of come to a conclusion. If you want a 30-minute consult with us, we'll be happy to kind of look at your situation and kind of share what we would do in that situation. Yes, I think that's kind of sums up the foreclosure process and all the different things. I want to wrap this up with just eviction. It's one of my least favorite topics. It's probably the worst part of this whole process of foreclosure. But I just really want to kind of make you aware of what it is, and just to minimize the surprises, right, and the pain. So now I want to talk about a subject which is a part of the foreclosure process, and probably the most painful part is eviction. So I just want to offer some insights into it, just so to minimize the surprises and the pain. Eviction is basically removing who's ever in the property after it's been bought by the bank or a new investor, a real estate investor or new homeowner. It could even actually be a new homeowner that wants to live in the property. It's not always fun. You can avoid sometimes eviction by creating a new lease from an investor, but usually it's not advised. It's actually illegal for an investor to go in and buy a property and then lease it back to you. Okay, that's actually violating bank laws, so it's probably not going to happen. But eviction is it's the process where they file a notice, you get a notice, and then typically the sheriff or the marshals come out and remove who's ever on the property. They'll actually put all of your stuff out on the sidewalk. So it's very disrupting. It's very public. In Chicago, they actually throw stuff out of the second windows. If you were on the second story down to the street, people would be like like catching stuff and running off with it. So you don't want to have that happen, is what I'm trying to say, is that if you know the eviction is coming, do what you can to prepare for it and to move out and to find a new space, and don't let it happen to you. Any other thoughts about it?
Yeah, that was one of the things that happened, that they were getting ready to auction the property. Actually, I think they did auction the property, and we ended up going and talking to this woman who didn't even own the property. The grandmother owned the property, and then the son had it for a while, and they both ended up dying. And so she was the girlfriend of the son, and she had 2 kids, and she was living there because nobody had actually, come and talk to her about that she needed to go. And so I tried to make sure that she knew that there would be an eviction process, and I didn't know how long she had, but she needed to come up with a plan B because she had 2 small children.
Yeah, and it's different in every location. It can take different times. Sometimes you can stall the eviction if you have the right paperwork and there are attorneys that handle evictions and stuff like this. If you're filing a wrongful foreclosure lawsuit and you're looking to redeem the property, there can be that in place. So check with your local municipality. It's either the sheriff or the marshals that handle it, and find out what the process is in your area. So we hope that you never have to go through that event.
Mm-hmm.
But just be aware that it is a part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
And call us. We can definitely assist.
well, yes, we'll definitely do what
Yeah,
we can.
yeah.
Yes. But let's all try and stop the foreclosure before that happens and give you way more
Mm-hmm.
options and go from there. So, all right, well, thank you for joining us today. We
Thank
love you.
you.
You are our homeowner heroes. We're just,
Yay.
we're rooting for you, and we want to get you through this process with grace and ease, and make it as best as possible. So until next time, take care. Talk to you later.
Here, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.